So thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Paola Telfer. I'm CEO and one of the founders of Sens.ai. And we're really excited to be hosting our first town hall. Thank you for carving time out in your day. So the purpose of this is, is really to start building community and to really start getting to know how you guys are using, how you're planning on using it. This is an open channel. This is not going to be a one and done. This is not the only town hall we plan to have. So if your questions don't get answered, for those of you who sent them to us in advance, don't worry about that. We'll try and weave them in to the theme today. So we had a lot of questions coming into this. There's no shortage of things to talk about. So what we thought we would do, just to have it be contained and understandable really as we go through, we thought we'd kind of theme it. So today's theme is really around the introduction to Sens.ai. So we thought it'd be a bit about getting to know us, getting to know the founders, a technology overview, and then a bit about the Sens.ai experience, the app experience, what you can expect. So on the panel today, there's three of us that will be, kind of having a bit of a fireside chat on this. And so I've got Julihn, and I think if you unmute, you go into. And so Corey is a co-founder of Sens.ai, and he's our chief technology officer. And this is our second company together. So Corey and I know each other really well. And so, I'm an electrical engineer. That's my training background and my bachelor's degree. And I know lots of great engineers, but Corey stands, head and shoulders above, and he continually impresses me. And so he's, the one behind the design of Sens.ai from the ground up. So this is all the way from electrodes, firmware, hardware, software. He's quite a powerhouse. So he'll help us, understand a bit of the technology side for those that are curious. And then we have Dr. Drew Pierson with us. Very excited that he's, in the last number of months, joined our science advisory board. Drew has a wealth of experience. He's former head of neuroscience at 40 Years of Zen, and he's also got 20 plus years experience in this field. So working with some peak performers. I know Drew can't name names, but some very high profile people, Navy SEALs, professional athletes, heads of businesses that are high profile. So Drew has a lot of knowledge he can share on that front. And actually, Drew's got a device with him as well. And so he's been helping us do some of the testing and tuning of late. There you go. Oh, yeah, you can show it a bit. So this is, so let's see if we can have some fun with this. So a little bit about, let's get started. Let's warm it up a little bit with just getting to know each other. And how about we start with your personal motivation for being a part of this Sens.ai project venture, if you will. So Corey, let's start with you.
Great. Thanks, Paula. Thanks everyone for taking time out of your day. And for those of you that are going to watch it later, the recorded version, thank you for taking the time to watch. So Paula and I, a little over 3 years ago, we started dreaming about what Sens.ai would be. And when we were doing that, Paula sort of led us through an exercise to, answer sort of three big questions. What do you want to sort of contribute? What do you want to experience? And what do you want to sort of do in terms of growing and learning in life? And as we both sort of dug into those things, something that really emerged for me in terms of contribute and really became my motivation for Sens.ai, for being part of Sens.ai, was looking at how, in my life, there was so many things just, were in place for me to excel, to have a good access to education, all of these things. And, everybody has in life different roadblocks. And so what are ways that I can contribute in terms of helping to level that playing field, in terms of helping to remove a roadblock for somebody? And for me, that's a huge part of Sensei, because we can see sort of our journey on a continuum, and all along that path, along our journey, there's always something that might be holding us back a little bit. And so I really see Sensei as a tool to, hopefully even just remove one stumbling block, one roadblock for each person that interacts with it. And so that's my goal with Sensei, is to just help somebody along their journey, just one more step. So that's my motivation for Sensei.
That's great. Yeah, that was a really powerful exercise that we did together. And we learned a lot about each other, just in terms of life perspective. I think besides, the company product perspective, it also helped us decide how we wanted to build the company. What we wanted to experience was, we wanted to experience being able to work anywhere in the world. And we wanted the people that we worked with, our teammates, to be able to have that as well. And so that's kind of been the design around the Sensei team as well. So that's very interesting. And for me, I came across neurotechnology for the first time when I was at a really low point in my life. And so part of my motivation is to help people get ahead of that and not have to hit a low point before doing something very proactive with their mental health. And I think now too, as I'm aging, I think about aging well, right? So another motivation for me is, not just for myself, but, how to contribute. Our lifespans are getting longer, but how are we managing the cognitive longevity aspect? Right. And so that's becoming more important to me as I age. And so I'll turn that over to Drew. Drew, you joined us some months ago. We've known each other for a while. What's your motivation?
Motivation for me, and I've been doing this a long time. I kind of know the wonders and the effect of neurofeedback, heart rate variability, and other neurotech. And the biggest issue is getting it out to the masses. And it's been a frustration for me and a lot of other clinicians too, for getting quality information back to the brain. So you have your professional systems out there that are very difficult to use, and you need someone qualified to use those. And then you have some consumer-based ones out there that I've tried over the years. I've tried them all. And they just don't have the signal quality. They don't have the feedback correct. They're not doing it at the right sites. There's a lot of different levels that just didn't satisfy that for me. So I couldn't recommend them. And this is the first device out that does all those things correctly. It's easy to use. I can't tell you how nice it is. And we'll probably go into this later about the connectivity and things like that. It makes all the difference.
That's great. Yeah, we definitely, we didn't set out to build our own electrodes, as Corey recently reminded me, because it's been such a big part of the product development was developing the electrodes. But initially, we thought we could get them off the shelf. And we tried all kinds of electrodes. And again, we had a very high bar. We wanted to be able to read the highest and fastest brain waves, which are the gamma brain waves. And we couldn't do that without either lots of goop in your hair or without really spiky electrodes that were quite uncomfortable to wear. So so thank you for mentioning that, Drew. So let's get a little bit more, let's zoom out a little bit. So for some people on the call, neuromodulation and these sorts of techniques are old hat, and they've been doing it in clinics and, retreat centers and that. But for some folks, this is brand new. And when people first hear about this, I know when I first tell people who haven't heard about any of this sort of neurotech, it seems a little science fiction. And it's sort of, and also it might seem a little bit like, why would I have to do that? Why do I need to brain train? Maybe my brain works quite well already, right? So how would you address that perspective? Maybe Drew.
So getting into this is, as far as you mentioned, science fiction. It's back in the day, it wasn't even taught in school. right? I had to learn a lot of this on my own. And over the last couple of decades, it's really gotten to the universities and things like that finally. Thank goodness. And what we're seeing is our control of our physiology. And you're learning to control that. And all we're doing is taking the signal and feeding it back to you precisely. And then you can learn to modulate. It's like learning to drive a car, basically. You know how to shift gears, you know which gear to be in. You're not in first gear when you jump on the highway, but you're not in sixth gear either when you go into your garage. So we're kind of looking at the brain that way. So we're able to adjust and modify how we neurologically interact with the world around us.
And what about? I mean, you've worked with a lot of peak performers, right? Professional athletes and heads of businesses. What about peak performers? Like, why do peak performers need to brain train? Well,
the biggest thing in any peak performance avenue, there's a lot of incredible physical people out there, and all of them were in typically like the top 1% of what they could do. But the difference that came out was their mental capability under pressure. So once they reach that threshold, that resistance, basically, that's when they either fall apart or they go beyond the other peers that are around them. And this gives the person the capacity to increase their resilience. It increases their ability to get more into the flow. It increases the communication in the brain. It makes it much more efficient. So they can hold that neurological state for much longer time without going into error mode. And I saw this in top pilots. I saw this with the SEALs. I saw this with Major League Baseball, football. Well, a lot of the football guys were brain injury because of all the hits. But, bringing them back up is a big factor. But the Olympic athletes down here in San Diego and Otay Mesa and things like that too really operate it. It's just a margin of error that's so slim, and if they can step beyond that, that makes all the difference in competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think for myself, I've always considered myself a peak performer, and I would say now my mental performance, it's much sharper and much clearer, even compared to 10, 15 years ago. And that's quite remarkable because I don't think I could see a next level at that time, but there is always a next level. Right.
Yeah. Paula, if I could maybe jump into, I think, for me, my first exposure to neurofeedback brain training, I was actually hesitant. And I think that's sort of a common as this, is still, sort of a early adopter kind of thing. And my hesitancy was around this sort of, hey, I'm already kind of peak performing. Like, should I actually do this? Like, what is this actually doing to my brain? And, as we got into it, it's actually not intimidating, because what is actually occurring is not about changing your brain. I think that's a really easy misconception. And there's a subtlety here, because what it's actually about is taking your brain and making it more efficient, stronger, and be able to, have higher endurance in specific states. That's the type of brain training we're talking about here. So if you're like, peak performing, like super into focus, super into sports, super into meditation, this is about being able to sort of dial that in, making your brain more efficient, stronger, and be able to sort of hold those states for longer periods of time. And that's, that's beneficial to everybody, to be able to go from, one state to another, to sort of shift gears, as Drew sort of gave that analogy earlier, to shift gears faster, into from one state to another, and to be able to hold into those states is super powerful. And it's just like going to the gym. If you don't strengthen that capability in your brain, you're not going to be able to do it. And it's not just about, if you're using the gym analogy, it's not just about doing one exercise. There's lots of different exercises and lots of different brain states. The brain is extremely complex. And so, whether it's, peak performance, meditation, or, hey, I just, want to sleep better, or whatever it is, there's a whole gamut of benefits that are accessible to really anyone.
Okay, this is great. So, okay, let's talk about some features of Sensei. So let's do it with, just what's your favorite feature, and talk a little bit about that feature. Let's do that as a way to dive in. So Corey, why don't you keep going here?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So my favorite feature is something that I think, if you look at sort of what we, have talked about on our website, what we've talked about on our Indiegogo page, is actually something that we'll be releasing more information on in sort of the weeks ahead. So a little sneak peek for those of you that are here. My favorite feature is really our assess module. And specifically within that, what we're doing in the assess module is taking really precise timing measurements of your brain's response to different sort of stimulus that will go on during sort of this assess part of the device and the app. And what that means is you're going to be able to have like real numbers, real data on, for example, your speed of thinking. That having access to that number, and not just like once in your life, but over time, how it changes to different external factors, different while you're using Sensei, and other things, I think is game changing, because up to this point, that type of data, you probably could only ever get if you were part of some major clinical trial, or maybe had a very significant brain injury, or something to that effect. And the fact that at a sort of consumer level, you're going to be able to have that over time is, I'm super excited about that. So I think that's one of my absolute favorite features.
Okay, this is great. It's great. Good sneak peek. And then Dr. Drew, how about yourself? Favorite features?
And I have a few, because I like Corey's too now. No. So clinically, when I do a lot of things, we have to swap between different devices to do STEM or EEG or HRV. This contains all of those all at once. So I don't have to switch between units, which is awesome. So I can put this on, and you're reading EEG and getting your neurofeedback, and you're getting the photobiomodulation. And you can do the HRV, all built in, and you're monitoring during this. It gives me the capacity to work more consistently without swapping these things out, and it makes it much more integrated. Now, the adaptive part of this is kind of like what I find is the secret sauce, what I find more relevant than even the clinical things that I'm doing now, because what it's doing is assessing as we go along and adapting to each personal brainwave or heart rate variability, and then adjusting toward that and stemming toward that too through photobiomodulation. And it just, the adaptive response is like, getting a tailor-made suit. It fits you. It doesn't fit anyone else. So it's a big jump in neurotech as far as I'm concerned.
That's great. Yeah. And I guess for myself, we recently introduced the two-person heart synchrony as part of the Indiegogo campaign, and we just did it right before this call, just to share. And I've seen it done in the past in retreats and in certain conferences and that sort of thing, and usually it would require either very good equipment to do it more precisely, more to your biometric signals, or we would rely on apps that are just doing a generic, let's say, certain number of breaths per minute sort of counter that we would synchronize to. And so what we're doing in Sensei is doing a precise measurement that creates the ability for each individual to get into their own personal heart coherence and then to come together into a heart synchrony. And this is really now getting towards group flow and group dynamics that is really quite a powerful unlock. At this point, this is for two people, so we're talking about business partners, partners of life, even yourself and a child. But for me, that's kind of it's very powerful for business. Like if as you're coming into a brainstorming meeting, being in sync eases that flow of understanding, of communication, and then even much more so in relationships, in personal relationships. What do you think about that, Drew?
And it also sets a foundation. A big thing here is the synchrony sets a foundation for the cornerstone and the foundation for other brainwaves on top of it. And bigger ideas come out of this. So everything comes in layers. So if your heart is in coherence, then that translates to and affects the brain. And then the brain starts getting into its own synchrony, right? And then there's layers within that. And then we get into some higher frequencies. And then that's where the ahas, the insights, the eurekas come from. And everyone's getting them. It's like one big download between people. And it's quite spectacular once you see a group in flow. And some of the studies out there right now are actually showing, on individual factors of like HRV, that if you're not, or you have a lower HRV and a lower coherence score for the heart, you're not going to do as well as someone with a higher score. And we see that in groups also. So what happens is that these groups working as a team tend to flow through things much easier if they are in synchrony. And that can include both the heart and the brain. And there's differences between the two. But it's such a significant factor in anyone wanting to perform well, but not only perform well, but be at ease with those that are part of your cohort or your group or your partner. Mm-hmm. Because you can also synchronize. And a big thing here, you can sync, like with a couple, you can synchronize in disharmony. And every time you see that person, it brings up this angst, basically. And you can actually synchronize to that, but training the correct way and training the synchrony between people the correct way actually increases the compassion, increases the equanimity, increases the ability to really respond appropriately instead of just react in your life.
Yeah. And on that front, actually, we'd had a more detailed discussion on this, Drew, that I think might be interesting to share. So, people, I think I started when I said, how often would you recommend, a couple do this? And you were saying if they were serious, they would do this every day, right? Like, for like a couple months or like at least a month. And then also this idea of like, there's a mathematics to the coherence, individual coherence, and then the synchronizing. And then that mathematics really only lasts, for that training, and then a little bit into the next, moments. But the connection, the feeling of that synchrony could last for hours, and then you're actually training it, right? So that's just something to clarify about what's really happening here. We're retraining.
Yeah. So it can last, directly. People can remain synced for, 10, 20, 45 minutes afterwards. If you're really close with the person, it can last all the time you're actually in contact with them. And if you're training it, you typically HRV and synchrony kind of start dropping off after about 2 days or about 48 hours. So if you're training consistently there, it will keep that resonance up there, and it'll just be much easier to stay there at that point.
Okay. And then, I mean, I'll just share, like, in terms of favorite features, I love it that I can share it with my son, right? And I can share it with my mom, right? Like, because it is personalized and because we got these different, very, specialized programs, my son uses it for, I tell him it's good for his soccer, right? But that same focus program that he uses for soccer and for first person, shooter games, is also really good for his schoolwork, right? So I love it that I can share that with him. And more recently, as we're evolving the visual feedback, which is like what looks like a game that's controlled by your mind, we're getting rave reviews from, the 12-year-old circle, which is a really difficult market segment to hit with gaming because it's very competitive. But so I really love that I can share that with him. Actually, let's go into gamma a little bit here. So, I said in the beginning that, we had set this bar for ourselves that we wanted to be able to read the gamma waves, which are the hardest to read. They're the fastest, they're the smallest. Drew, maybe talk to us about gamma. What does that state feel like? Why is it important for peak performance? Why was it important that we include that?
So gamma's been a recent kind of entrance into the neurofeedback field. And the reason is it's really hard to get a good signal through the skin without what we call electromuscle kind of interference. Because once you start getting up into 35, 40 hertz, then it's really hard to see these frequencies. But with the newer technology and the newer electrodes, we're able to finally see these frequencies that high-level monks and high-level athletes and high performers are also producing at these frequencies that we find these bursts of gamma happening. And what this will do is help train those. Now, the state that people feel, and there's a number of different states. Some people say, hey, it's akin to Kundalini kind of coming up, and this is a yoga technique. And what does that feel like? It's like energy kind of coming up through the system. There's clarity, there's insight. And like I said, it was also the frequency of eurekas, of ideas just popping up. What happens is these disparate ideas all of a sudden come together. And as the alpha and theta, the lower frequencies are just modulating along, you'll get the gamma bursting on top of it. And that's when these ideas start popping up. And it really produces some incredible insight and incredible bliss. It's also the bliss frequency, and you feel good and you feel happy with it. And your brain works faster and works better. It's more efficient. And you want it to be able to do these bursts appropriately.
Yeah.
And
okay, that's awesome.
I think in terms of features, Paula, in terms of, favorite features, doing gamma wouldn't be possible without the sensors that we, spent so long developing, which we didn't originally. We thought, oh, somebody will solve it. We'll be able to find a solution for that. And really, couldn't find something that would work, that you didn't need, Dr. Drew to actually put them on your brain and make sure you've got a good signal and do all that stuff. And so that's something that we spent a lot of time working on. And it's, you can all blame Paula for that because her hair is impossible to get a good signal through. It's I don't know, Drew, is it, the top 1% of hardest heads to get a signal on?
By far, it's a density factor. So we look at follicle density, and
Okay.
getting between the hair to the skin and getting a good read is always a challenge in any system. And we spend a lot of time getting good signal. And Paula has a special ability of having a very dense follicle.
Yes, I'm not only a founder, also its toughest customer.
Yes.
yes, for sure. Maybe the pain point was actually extra high for me. Like I thought this has to be solved. So I think neurotech was starved for a Latin American CEO.
And you know what, like I can tell you the number of times that Paul and I got together and I would have another, version iteration of our, solution with our sensors. And I would think, okay, this is the one, we're going to get an amazing clean signal and it's going to be comfortable. And we're going to, check all the boxes that we had set out to solve, and just didn't happen. And then, eventually, it got better and better. And then we had sort of a breakthrough moment, and we're able to not only, have an amazing clean signal, but also have a flat, soft, comfortable electrode sensor. And that, so in terms of features, that's another, favorite for sure.
Drew, for you with the headset, how long does it take for you to get the signal? Seconds or minutes?
I would say anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds. I have less hair than you, Paula, so it's
okay. Yeah,
it's easier for
sure.
me to get in. But in terms of time, it's just a few seconds before it's probably, I would say 4 or 5 seconds before it's starting to read appropriately. Yeah, and we're just wetting it. It's just a little bit of dampness on the electrodes. This is not, scrubbing the scalp with a wooden dowel like we used to do back in the day, and scrubbing it with alcohol and then putting electrode paste down as a base before we even put on the bigger components. This is just slide it on with a little bit of damp on those, and it starts reading.
So it was a key part in achieving the goal of having it be scalable and available for anyone to use without an expert technician to help you put it on. So that was really fundamental. So, as let's talk about the technology a little bit. So it is a lot. There's a lot of new terms in as you start learning about the neurotechnology field. People hear about PEMF and electrical stimulation and photobiomodulation, and neurofeedback, biofeedback. What Sens.ai has tried to do is we've tried to simplify that. So we do have a pretty stacked, neurotechnology deck, but at the same time, we try and talk about it in terms of boost, train, and assess. So there's 3 different modes. And the most important one to Sens.ai is train. And we've talked a fair bit about train already, because that's about the long-term trait changes. That's ultimately what we all want. And so, let's dive into some of those technology elements a little bit. We can nerd out a bit, but let's start with train, because it is the most important. So, so Drew, we combined neurofeedback and heart rate variability training. Why is that important, or how is that useful?
Well, everything starts with the heart, and I learned this early on. I was doing EEG work, and it's really great, and we got results. And here in San Diego, actually a little bit north of San Diego, there's a monastery with monks, and I went up there to record just to look at brain states and things like that for advanced meditation and what it looked like. Gosh, this is a couple decades ago. And anyways, I hooked them up and got all these electrodes on and things like that. And, kind of in the background, there's a little bit of whispering and some snickering and things like that. And didn't think it was like typical of the younger monks to do this. And I kind of asked, hey, what's going on? Did I do something wrong? Was there a faux pas? I don't understand all the steps and things like that of what they were doing. And they say, no, why aren't you hooking up to the heart? Because everything comes from here. This is where we meditate from. We don't meditate from
you forgot the heart.
Yeah. And I went, oh. And it's not like I couldn't hook up to the heart with the systems I had. It's just not something we'll typically do when we're just monitoring the brain. So that was a big lesson for me.
We do tend to get very caught up in the brain in Western culture. And then there's a balance, and there's a correlation, really, a very strong correlation with the heart. Yeah. And
the heart signal actually kind of fosters the brain signal too. So the more in coherence, the better the heart rate variability in the heart, the better you're going to function in the brain too. And the better these signatures that pop up that lead to just better moments in life.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, sometimes like people aren't aware that neurofeedback has been around for like 50 years, right? In clinical environments, and people wonder, how we're able to get it down to 3 electrodes and still be able to have, efficacy, but also this breadth of programs. Can you speak a little bit about the placement of the electrodes, like on the midline?
Yeah. So
how that works?
The electrodes where they're placed right now are frontal and central and what we call parietal, or the back of the head. And these are major hubs in what we call a rich club network. They're not the only hubs, but they're the major hubs. And these are interlinked. So they call it the rich club network because it's where everything's linked together. So these are key points in the brain that we've seen and studied and used all these years to produce the biggest effects in the brain. A lot of the biggest issues with a lot of systems out there for like consumers, they're training off the wrong sites on the scalp and not where we want, like in the back of the brain here. Do we want certain signals? And the answer is yes, we want like alpha in the parietal region. And this is where we begin the journey through our different states of meditation and things like that. Now, part of the reason too, you're going to get the best signal quality along the midline there. You're going to get the most information, and it has the most hub connections too. So making it affordable, making it easy to use, and making it a consistent signal are 3 of the big things that we look at even clinically. And this does that.
Okay, that's great. And then, in the train mode, we actually include, it's almost like interval training. That's the experience. So you're doing training, a little bit of stim, training, a little bit of stim. And so what do you, obviously we've talked to you about that before. We worked with Jay Gunkelman on our approach. What do you see as the benefit of including the photobiomodulation in the training?
The photobiomodulation does a couple different things. One is stimulating at certain frequencies, right? So it's helping these cells, these neurons, actually fire at the frequency we want them to fire at. But it's also providing energy for that too. What happens in the brain is the brain will get to a certain threshold where it's not able to utilize very efficiently its energy, its ATP and things like that, mitochondria. And what happens is by introducing this photobiomodulation actually helps blood flow, it helps oxygen levels, it helps the energy transfer mechanisms, and it makes a big difference in keeping going with training. It's like boosts of energy and boosts of neuromodulation. It gives the kind of pendulum swing for the neurons to follow, and it really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the learning in neurofeedback is dependent on a learning, innate learning of ours, of humans, that's operant conditioning. And so what we've done is interlace the photobiomodulation in a way that's respecting the operant conditioning while increasing the learning curve of the neurofeedback. So it's a balance that we've struck there, but we think will have really great effects for you. And so then the other mode is boost mode, which is photobiomodulation by itself. So you've already touched on that a fair bit, Drew. So this has been, in use for decades. Really recently, there's a proliferation of literature, scientific literature on this. A lot of people really interested in this particular modality because of what you're saying of the oxygenation, the blood flow, and the ramifications of that on cognitive longevity. And so there is a lot of literature. One of our science advisors, Dr. Tato, that you'll see on our About page if you check it out, he's actually compiling, I know it can be hard to go and look up a lot of these studies, but you might be curious. So he's compiling a summary of literature on healthy brains using these various modalities that we use. So heart rate variability, neurofeedback, photobiomodulation. And so we'll have something like that we can share likely early in the new year. But this is a very interesting arena for cognitive longevity in particular. And what's unique about the transcranial photobiomodulation boost mode that Sensei uses is, like Drew has mentioned already, is that it's adaptive to you. And so that means that we'll adapt, the pulse will adapt the duration, and we're using the electrodes to look at your brain's physiological response. And then a
big part of this is more is not necessarily better in this realm. You want to do it because if you stimulate too much, it creates kind of like a feedback loop in the brain where it actually pushes back. So you want to do it appropriately. And you don't want to do it too little either, where it doesn't give any response. So find your sweet spot.
And we actually started with no intention of doing adaptive boost. Our initial sort of testing was on just sort of one size fits all boost. And we actually, as we were testing and looking at the data coming off of it, saw, very inconsistent results from that, from person to person. And so we actually, worked really hard and iterated a whole bunch to build out an adaptive sort of boost mode that does personalize within the session, and have seen really fantastic results from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then, the last module is assess. So it's the assess module or assess mode. And then that has the event related potentials that Corey spoke about already. I'll touch on that a little bit just to wrap that part up, because I realize now that we're going a little over time. So what we're trying to do there is give next level, sort of self-knowledge, right? So I think, we're used to monitoring devices, like the Fitbits of the world, where we're getting some information about our activity. What we think is, in the end, it doesn't matter even if you're brain training or you're meditating, we want to see life changes. I think that's what we all want to see. And the best way for us to measure that is functional changes. And so ERPs is a method that's been around, since the Second World War. It's been used in cognitive neuroscience for quite a long time. And it gives us this precise measurement so that then you can actually see what's working for you and the changes it's making in your life. So we'll talk a lot more about that in the coming weeks, I'm sure. We'll be sharing a bit more about that on the Indiegogo campaign. Now, we were going to talk a bit about the Sensei app experience. I think we can still do that. Anyone that has to go, it's totally fine. Don't worry about that. So as we talk about the app experience, I'm thinking about, what Drew just said, more is not necessarily better. All right. And that's not necessarily, my personality style, or a lot of people that we attract are not necessarily people that want more, and they think that is better. So our Sensei app experience has been designed with this in mind, right? We're talking about, the brain. We want to use best practice. We want people to have a good experience, and we want it to be fun as well and engaging. So, maybe I'll zoom out a little bit and just say, like, our programs cover all the various brain frequencies, and this goes, from 1 hertz to 50 hertz. And so I like to think about it like an ocean analogy, right? So if alpha, brain waves, so this is, let's say, like 10 hertz approximately, is sort of like the floating at the top of the ocean. Then as you go deeper into, let's say, like theta states, you're going deeper into the ocean. You wouldn't do that without being prepared, right? So there is a, if you're doing deep sea exploration, go prepared. And so our Sensei app experience prepares you for that. There's building blocks, and there's really a setting you up for success mentality. Yeah, maybe it's good for me to say this because some of the questions we get are around more of a DIY style approach. We have not taken a DIY approach. We have purposefully, and there is no API. And we've purposely, gathered this group of experts, and you'll see the star-studded cast we have on the science advisory. There's good reason for that. It's because, we wanted to take best practice and best principles approach on this, so it could be efficacious for everyone to use, and that we could feel really good about releasing this, powerful tech at a mass market level. And so, yeah, so we always start, maybe before, I'll pass this to Corey to kind of guide us through what some of the aspects of the app experience, but as a fundamental principle, we start with balancing the nervous system. So we talked a fair bit already about heart rate variability training. We also use CALM, which is a program that we term alpha. It's alpha training, and focus, which is what we term SMR and beta training. We use those in the beginning to really balance the nervous system. And that comes in the form of a la carte programs and courses that are built into missions. But that is the foundation before you go too deep into theta or even deeper into gamma. And so gamma, even though it's the highest of the frequencies, we think of it as going even deeper into the ocean, but pulling sunlight in with you. So if you can work with that analogy, that is a bit of how it feels. So Corey, if we can go into a little bit about the app experience, Corey's background is also in user design. So there's been a lot of care put into the app experience.
Yes, strangely enough, as far into the sort of crazy, futuristic technology that I get into, I do have a background in experience design. And so that's something that we've, spent a lot of time thinking about. And as more and more people are able to experience the app, we'll incorporate your feedback in and iterate, as we go. So we've talked a lot about programs. You guys can check out the website. There's more information on some of the programs that are there. And as Paula already mentioned, as you use the app, more and more programs will unlock over time. And we've touched on the assessments, and again, we'll be releasing more information on the assess module in the weeks ahead. That's a part of the experience as well, is being able to do these assessments and get a real deep look inside your brain. But a really sort of critical component, which we don't talk about a ton, is our missions. And you don't have to do the missions. Paula mentioned you can sort of pick and choose programs, but what the missions do is they are sort of that guided experience. And they group different programs together that complement each other at a pacing that is going to give you the most success. And they also will have sort of core programs to the missions, but they also often have I like to call them like recommended pairings, right? So other like a boost that, hey, if you're doing this mission, you could also do this boost here and there if you just want something extra. And it's because those things work together really well and will sort of drive the results. When you first get into the app and first unlock the missions, you'll be able to sort of pick from a few different missions, but one group of those are what we call our reclaim missions. And so that might be like reclaim sleep or reclaim stress response. And so those group certain programs and a certain pacing in a way to help you achieve a certain goal. Or you might start off with our sort of, we often call it our, mission one, build resilience. And that if that's all you do is just one of those missions, I feel like Sensei is going to achieve our mission. Like if we just get, everybody just to do one of those missions, most of the missions, some of the missions are about 4 weeks long. Some of them are about 7 weeks. That's usually kind of the duration of those. And so I really recommend you do that, is get into the missions and sort of follow that through. And then I guess the other thing I just wanted to mention about the experience is, we've talked about boost and train already, but sort of why boost and why train. Maybe just dive and hit that one more time. So boost is more passive. Boost is, if you're just, feeling lazy or whatever, and just want, or you're just about to head into a meeting, or, you're just about to do something and you feel like you need a little lift. Boost is a great way because it, the photobiomodulation technique actually does introduce energy into the brain. And it also, the way we do it also does shift your state. That's, a sort of a temporary state thing, not a long-term thing. The train is really the exercise. That is where you build the strength and efficiency. So, so that's kind of how those go. So the missions are primarily focused on training, but often have like boost pairings that go with them.
The boost sommelier. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Boost pairings. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. The app is quite complex, and there's a lot that, we're still building out there, but, fundamentally, the missions are sort of your guide, as you go through, and really will help you sort of take that journey, through the as more and more programs unlock over time.
Yeah, and so they're on our Sensei website. On the programs page, we go through the programs. Very generally, we tend to group them into 3 categories. So they're me level, which is about self-care, and those are all accessible day one. And then there's the we level, more about contribution. So we're talking about creativity, about getting into flow, things like that. And then there's the all, which is more around transcendence, for lack of a better word, some of the deeper meditative stuff. So, so it's not a straight line. And so it's been designed to ebb and flow with you through life, because, we acknowledged, that peak performers are people too. And so we need help with fog and sleep at times. And these are not pathologies. These are just like ebbs and flows of life. Right. And so that's what the programs have allowed for. Drew, so you've seen the missions, the programs, all this sort of stuff, and the way the user experience is. How do you feel about that? How do you? I mean, I know in your practice you would tend to do a lot of that stuff yourself, a lot of that intervening with the protocols.
Yeah, so there's 2 things. It's setting up that stability factor neurologically, because you don't want to jump into a marathon without kind of training first. It would be a bad thing. So we do that with the brain too. You want to go through certain levels and certain types of training first before you dive deeper, like we said before. Part of this is, how much adjusting do I do in a clinical session? I do a lot of modulation, a lot of micro tuning, I guess. And watching this micro tune with the AI is really a significant factor in training. And it's reading things much faster than I can even read them clinically. So it's making these much needed adjustments to what we're doing is optimizing training and optimizing learning, right? So it's seeing how your neurons and electrical system are responding to this and how they're learning. And I don't know. It's kind of like the Khan Academy, basically, of the brain, right? So as you master certain levels, you're jumping up to the next level. Whereas instead of going over the lesson over and over and over again, even though you've learned it, or you're going to revisit it because you're not completing that as we predicted. So those are huge factors.
Extra.
Drew, you said something there, which maybe I just really quickly just add to is, and Paula, I think your sort of the journey and analogy as well. The missions and the programs aren't like one and done. Like it's very likely you'll go through and you'll go back to, a mission that you've already completed and do it again. There's huge benefit to revisiting those, especially some of those early missions, because they do set the foundation long term. And so, just because you complete the build resilience mission doesn't mean you shouldn't go back and do it again. And in fact, you could just repeat it many times and have significant benefits from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Corey, as we near the end here, people are always asking about the manufacturing process. So I mean, what's the give as much information as you can. I mean,
sure.
We're at a stage where obviously you, me, and Drew and some other folks have devices. And now we're, how far are we from having thousands of devices?
Yeah. Good question. So it's like the device that we're building is like it to me is very surprisingly complex. We didn't set out to build something quite this complex, but we actually did very early on in the business. In fact, probably within the first 6 months, we identified a manufacturing, partner lead that would help sort of guide us through that journey, because we'd seen so many, product launches sort of start and stop and actually deliver product like 2 years later. And so, we didn't want to do that. So we are like literally this week are getting our invoice, just got our invoice for our deposit for our tooling. So those are the molds that all the, the hard parts and the flexible parts, all these parts, there we go. Yeah. All these parts, go into molds and stuff. And so those tools are the next big step. And so I believe Monday, this coming Monday, we'll have our fit check meeting. So we'll have a 3D printed sort of final designs are being fit checked. The assembly of that is happening tomorrow. And then on Monday, we'll have a meeting to review that and sign off on the tooling. And then that'll sort of kick off that process. That takes a bit of time. And then, we'll get sort of first parts off of those molds. And be able to do, again, another iteration of testing with those before they sort of polish the molds and sort of get everything sort of finalized on that side. So, right now, we're on target. I think we're saying, May 2022, and we're hitting that target. Lots of moving parts. I think everybody sort of hears in the news about, supply chain disruptions and COVID and all this, how that's all impacting it. We're very aware of those things. It's possible, our molds get stuck in a shipping container and, take a little bit longer. And, we're trying to build that into our estimates. But otherwise, we've taken steps already to acquire a lot of the sort of electronic chips. So a lot of critical components, we've sort of pre-purchased quite a few of those to sort of mitigate some of those risks. So yeah, so we're on schedule. Obviously we'll keep everybody updated as we, go through this process to bringing, devices to your door, which is really excited.
That's great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Corey. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it there. Thank you, everyone. We'll send you a link through email of this recording, and we'll probably be posting some excerpts of the videos on the YouTube channel. And so, if some of your questions didn't get answered, we will get back to you, but in some way. But do check the FAQs and the discussion forum on the Indiegogo. And also check out our blog. We do have some pretty good stuff there on our Sens.ai/blog page. And then we'll be doing this again soon, and we'll probably get your feedback on what the next theme should be. So thanks again for your time today, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.